Hey guys, how you going? Hope you're all doing very well. This afternoon I'm going to be doing another movie review, so hopefully you find this one interesting. This movie is a crime film from South Korea, Korean language English subs, released in the year 2016, directed by Sung-Soo Kim, and this film is called Asura, the City of Madness. So Asura, the City of Madness is about this detective who is working for a very corrupt mayor who has a lot of power, and the detective is basically at this guy's disposal. So one evening, this detective is actually responsible for the death of another detective, and so this main character doesn't want this known, so he frames the death on this drug addict who has no recollection of that night. So he believes that he's got away with it, but unfortunately the prosecutor, who's also very corrupt, he has evidence to suggest that this detective was responsible for this. So unfortunately for the detective, not only does he have to play along with the corrupt mayor, but now he has to play along with the corrupt prosecutor who actually wants to bring down the mayor. So the detective is actually doing the dirty work for both of these men that basically contradicts each other and leaves him in a very tight space. So as the movie goes along, this detective's life is about to become in danger as each side realise what this detective is doing and how basically everything is threatening to fall apart. So it's going to climax into a very brutal conclusion, and what that conclusion is something you're going to have to find out for yourself, because that's as far as I'm going with my synopsis. Now my thoughts on Asura, the City of Madness. Once again, the Koreans have delivered another fantastic gangster experience. And when it comes to gangster films, South Korea is definitely my bread and butter. This is where I belong as far as this genre is concerned. When it comes to American classics such as Godfather, Casino, Goodfellas, all those movies that have come before it that inspired films such as this, I can appreciate what they've done for cinema and what they've done for this genre, the crime genre. But for me, once you've seen one, you've seen them all, and there's nothing really different within those movies. And so I don't really gravitate to them as much as I do to Korean cinemas, because they do have stories that have been told before, but there's something about Korean gangster films that just makes it a little bit different. It's in the style of the film and the characters that these movies depict, and also the situation and how they spiral out of control, and there's just got a certain charm to them that I really appreciate. And so gangster films aren't my number one genre, but when it comes to this genre, I definitely think South Korea are the lead runners. And so some of my favourite gangster films are New World, Bittersweet Life, and also Old Boy to some extent. That was in the crime sort of world. And so all these movies are very recognisable, and they have really set South Korea on the map as far as gangster films are concerned. And there have been other gangster films that I haven't liked as much, such as Nameless Gangster. I thought that was a little bit disappointing. And you've got a few others that didn't really live up to the hype. But coming into Asura, the City of Madness, I was hoping that it would really elevate itself back up to the levels of New World. And although Asura, the City of Madness, isn't quite as good as New World, it still elevates itself above to make a very memorable experience. If you are a fan of gangster films, I would highly recommend you check this movie out, because it never gets boring. And that's the beauty of the film, is it goes for over 2 hours. It's a very long film, but Koreans really know, in the gangster types of movies, they really know how to keep an audience on the edge of their seat. They know how to keep an audience on the end of a string, and it's like you're the puppets and they're the puppeteers and they're controlling you. And so none of this movie ever felt like it had any fillers, because the characters were so in-depth. The overall situation, it's a very plot-heavy film, and as the plot thickens, a lot of people start betraying each other, and there's a new ball game. So you're going down one road, and just when that road is about to tire itself out, all of a sudden it goes onto a new road, and this happens multiple times. And so it's a twist and turn. You don't know what this detective is going to do, because everyone around him is so corrupt. He's corrupt himself, although you get an insight into his life that it actually suggests that maybe he has an inkling of likability to him, but then that likable quality to him and the charm to him can't really come out, because the world around him is basically corrupt. And the whole film reeks of corruption. It's a very dirty film. All the characters are despicable, and you don't know where you can go for trust, so there's no safety net. And there's no safety net for this main character, so it's like a pinball machine. He's just going from one point to another point to another point, and you can go along on the ride with him, is because of how well this movie is actually directed. I thought it looked absolutely fantastic. The acting performances, especially from the detective, was fantastic as well. You've got a villain who was extremely memorable. He was a very frightening guy. He was a guy in power, which makes him even scary, because the people were relying on him. But he was actually doing dirty work behind the scenes. And the beauty of it is that, yes, corruption is an everyday world. In everyday society, there is corruption, but we don't see that corruption. But this movie allows you to get into that corrupt world, and you feel as though this detective's world is getting smaller and smaller, and it starts to become very claustrophobic. So I thought to myself, I'm really really getting a lot of sympathy for this guy. I want him to get out of this world that he doesn't really belong and that wants to be a part of, but he can't, he basically has no other option but to go along with it. So when you've got the prosecutor and the actual mayor telling him what to do, and basically it's contradicting each other, you don't know where this detective is going to go, and you just feel as though the whole situation is like a pressure cooker and it's going to explode, and it does explode. There is some extremely violent scenes in this film that I thought were really well done. South Korean cinema, if you've seen Old Boy, the fight scenes in Old Boy, if you've seen Bittersweet Life and the fight scenes in that, you will get an inkling into the fight scenes in this film. The choreography is absolutely fantastic. There's a lot of stabbing, there's a lot of hacking with machetes and cleavers, and there's also a lot of shooting, and so there's a lot of blood in this film, more blood than the normal sort of South Korean gangster film, so it is much more of a hardened type, but I thought the violence really summed up the really brutal world that this whole movie is depicted in, so that was great. Cinematography excellent. There's the camera angles were fantastic, especially in the car chase scene. There's a car chase scene in this film that I thought was absolutely fantastic, and it's almost worth the price of admission just to see that scene, because that is really in your face, and so nothing is ever but basically it's all full throttle, pedal to the metal. It's going at 100 miles an hour, and it feels as though the car that you're in has lost its brakes, and you're just bracing for the impact. And when it hits you at the end, it really will hit you. And I just think it rounded off what was just a really, really memorable experience. As I said, the acting was great. The whole sense of corruption, basically corrupting these people, the corruption in order to become a very powerful man, and what power can bring to you, and how these powerful people can play along people below them, and how scary that can be. So the detective is in for a ride that he'll never forget, and fortunately the viewer can go on the ride with him, and the viewer will really remember a lot of things about this movie. So the characters were really well written out. A few criticisms from other people suggested that the characters weren't very interesting, but I thought they were interesting. I thought the ones that mattered were interesting. So there's a lot of characters that come into the film, but the detective and the mayor and also the prosecutor are the main players, and I thought those players were fantastic, and the rest just complement off them, because the rest of the characters are there for the progression of the plot. And when the plot progresses, the more crap these three characters get themselves into. So I just thought it was a very rewarding payoff, and it's just everything that you'd expect from South Korean cinema. There are a few problems I have with the film, is that there were some song choices in the movie that I didn't really like. Now, I can appreciate directors trying to use music that isn't associated with a specific scene. For example, a violent scene mixed in with a song that is not from a violent world. Quentin Tarantino does this very well. Stuck in the Middle of You by I can't remember the band's name, but Steelers Wheel, Stuck in the Middle with You, which is a song that wasn't really associated with torture, but when Quentin Tarantino put it in that film, it gave the song a new meaning. And that's what I thought this director tried to do, but it didn't really work. I felt it was completely out of place, and it took me out of that specific scene. I don't think it hit me as hard as it really should have. And I also thought that the movie is extremely plot heavy. So the only problem with that is for people who aren't your avid viewer, and you really aren't into subtitle films, you're not really going to be able to follow it. It's going to get confusing. There were a few times where I got confused a little bit, but it never took me out of the overall experience, so I didn't mind that too much. But if you're not paying attention from start to finish for 2 hours, you might find yourself lost. And so I just thought that was the reason why it never loses its focus, is because it is so plot heavy. There's so much going on. So for the 2 hours, I never felt like there was any filler, and I thought that every minute was as important as the other. So they were the only criticisms in what was an absolutely fantastic gangster film. Go out there and see it. I'm going to give it 4.5 stars. Alright guys, that's it for my review. Hope you enjoyed it. Till next time, keep watching movies, and I'll see you later.